You did a good job. All the respect in the world for that. Sorry, Matt. I owe you an apology. We were working hard to get our duet together. All the slots were filled this year. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. We'll have to sign up early. Maybe we'll close with that one. Not this one, maybe next year. Yeah. Not this. Oh, goodness. Oh, it's been a good week. Enjoyed the service last night. Went through the installment of communion, through the foot washing. That was the second foot washing service I'd been to. We went to the one last year. I got to admit, that's one of those things that I hid from for a few years because it just, I don't know, seemed a little weird to me until you do it. And when you do it, it is one of the most humbling experiences. Just the idea that Jesus said to serve. Here's what you had the disciples sitting up there. You have the Son of God in the room with you. They're distracted by things going on around them. And he stops to serve, to wash their feet. One of the lowliest jobs you could have at the time. And then just to sit in a room full of guys back there, and we're singing hymns together and just taking turn washing each other's feet. Just, it's a neat thing. It really is. And I would recommend at some point being part of that because it is a very humbling experience. We are going to end up in Matthew 27 tonight. But just to get caught up, we had, of course, the start of communion. Come to that. After that, they went to Gethsemane, which will get us up to speed here. They went to Gethsemane. Jesus went to pray. He took three up ahead with him, Peter, James, and John, I believe. And he said, you guys stay here and pray with me. I'm going a little further. He went to pray, agonizing prayer. That, if there was another way, that would be good. But if not, your will be done, not mine. Came back 3 times. Of course, they'd fallen asleep. It'd been a long day for them as well. I know we maybe sometimes pick on the disciples for things they do, or, Peter getting out of the boat and sinking, but, everybody else was still in the boat. At least he got out, So it's easy to pick on them. I would have done this, should have done that. You never know what you would do or what you should do when you're in that situation. But ultimately, he was arrested, went before they called it trials. That's, I guess. But it was decided before he ever got there. So many laws were broken just to get him to trial and to go through the trial. Way more than, obviously, Jesus ever broke or could if he wanted to. And through that point, Pilate got involved, and he did everything he could to try to keep the peace with Rome and make everybody else happy, and he knew he shouldn't have done it, did it anyway. Eventually it comes the time to release either Jesus or Barabbas, and, through the help of maybe some of the priests, some of the elders, and just people, they decided that the best thing to do was release Barabbas and crucify Jesus. And at that point, Pilate said, I wash my hands of the situation, and sent him off to be flogged, and then on to the crucifixion. And so we're going to be picking up right there in verse 27. So here we go. So then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! Then they spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took off his robe, put his own clothes back on him, and led him away to be crucified. So a few things here. We're going to, we'll just work our way through it. So everything about this moment was really to humiliate Jesus. That was the purpose. That was the point. The Jewish leaders, we go back to Matthew 26, towards the end of it there, they had already mocked Jesus as the Messiah. After the trial, they hit him and spit on him, and then they'd slap him and say, okay, Messiah, prophesy who hit you. So they were making fun. They were mocking of who he was as the Messiah. And now the Roman soldiers, they're mocking him as king. Now, prisoners were often nailed to the cross naked, simply for humiliation. Jesus' humiliation had started before he was crucified. He was publicly stripped and set before all. Now, at this point, they decided they were going to dress him as a king, once again, to humiliate him. So kings often wore scarlet. The reason being the dyes are really expensive. So if you saw someone walking around in a scarlet robe, you knew they were somebody special. So it was just kind of a vanity thing. Kings wore crowns, but not crowns that cut and pierced and bloodied the head of the king that wore them. Kings had beautiful, ornate scepters, symbolizing their power, and Jesus was given a reed. Kings were honored. Jesus was offered mocking worship. Kings were greeted with royal titles. Jesus and even the Jews were mocked with, "Hail, King of the Jews." The soldiers were saying, in essence, this is the best king that you can give us. So after that, Jesus was spat on, and he was hit on the head with the reed they'd put in his hand. Then Jesus was made to walk in a procession to the place of the crucifixion. Now, the route was estimated to be a half a mile long. The point of this, you go through town, everybody can see what happens if you cross Rome. It was generally a public service warning to stay in line. That was the idea of that walk. And we got to remember that Jesus had been scourged and beaten. Now, or flogged, same idea. What they would do is they'd have a handle with some strips of leather on it. There would be some piece of broken pottery, maybe some bone, maybe some little metal steel pieces, and they would whip you across the back with it. And they would go to the point to where you would be down to the muscle. So an awful. There were a few times people would die before they ever got to crucifixion just for that. And the idea was as the lashes came, they would lessen the more you would admit what you did or admit to the law you'd broken and confess. Well, Jesus said nothing. So he got the full brunt of it through the whole time. So the physical and mental abuse Jesus suffered, as well as the lack of water and food and sleep, caused this weak condition that he'd found himself in. So before the crucifixion, Jesus' condition, which we could say at the least serious, but probably close to critical. Those en route in the crucifixion were forced to carry the beam that they would eventually be hung on. And those weighed anywhere from 75 to 125 pounds. And remember, once again, what he's already been through up to this point. And often they would tie the hands to it. So they have it set across their shoulders, their hands tied to it. And you can imagine what would happen in the state they're in if you stumbled and fell. You've got no way to stop from hitting the ground. So Matthew 16:24, Jesus said this. He said, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Now, at the time, everyone that heard that knew exactly what that meant, to take up your cross. The cross had one purpose, and one purpose only, and that was death. So to take up your cross, there is no going back. There's not a point when you get in this situation that you can go and say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go back the other way. Once you take up the cross, it's a one-way trip, and it's going to be ultimately death. So the idea behind that, if you're going to follow me, take up your cross, mean it, and follow me no matter what. The cross wasn't about ceremonies or traditions. It was a way to simply execute people. And let's continue in our reading. Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. He was compelled to bear his cross. And then when they had come to a place called Golgotha, that is to say, place of the skull, they gave him sour wine mingled with gall to drink. But when he tasted it, he would not drink. So then they crucified him. Seems like a simple word. In 2004, a movie came out. It was called The Passion of the Christ. And I remember going to see it. I saw it. And it was shocking, and it was heartbreaking. And I don't think I could see it again. I tried once to watch it and couldn't do it. Couldn't do it again. So yet, I would argue that we haven't yet seen an accurate depiction of what the crucifixion would actually be. Now, the Bible spares us all the details. Simply says, and then they crucified him. Now, everyone in the day, they were well aware of the horrors of crucifixion. They'd seen it. It happened often. So it wasn't a big thing to them. But in 1986, there was an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it was titled, "The Physical Death of Jesus Christ." And here are some observations. And this is actually a much nicer version because I knew there would be some little ears here tonight. But still, it gets the point. So the cross was designed to produce a slow death, maximum pain and suffering. The victim's back had been torn open by the scourging. Remember that from earlier. That would be plenty. That would be enough. So the wound would open again as the blood had clotted to the clothes they had on. Once they got the crucifixion, they pulled the clothes off. Of course, everything would be opened back again. While hanging on the cross, each breath would cause the wounds on the back to scrape against the rough wood they were attached to. Now, driving the nails through the wrist would sever the median nerve, causing constant burning pain through both arms. Now, beyond the tremendous pain, the position on the cross made normal breathing impossible. The weight of the body locked the respiratory muscle in the inhale position, making exhaling extremely difficult. This caused severe muscle cramps, often causing the hands to stay in a locked hook-type position, making breathing even more difficult. Now, to get a good breath, you would have to push with your feet. Obviously, they're top each other, nailed also to the cross. You had a little platform there, what I understand, to stand on, but still not a lot. You have to push with your feet. Your wrists are nailed to the cross, so you can't pull with your hands, so you're pulling with your shoulders. Not made to do that. And this is something, as you're doing it, remember, you have to lift up, breathe in, down to exhale. You're doing this over and over and over. Every time you want to breathe, and remember, every time you do this up and down, your back is rubbing against that rough cross. And each time this would be, I would imagine, agonizing, exhausting, just to breathe. It was common for insects to burrow into the wounds of the victim on the cross. Birds would peck at the wounds. It was customary to leave the body on the cross to be eaten by wild animals. And once again, the idea was when people came through, they could see and go, we don't want any problems with Rome. Now, death from crucifixion would come in many ways. Maybe shock from blood loss, being exhausted, too exhausted to breathe, dehydration, stress, induced heart attack, congestive heart failure. And if these didn't happen quick enough, they would break your legs, making it impossible to breathe. Now remember, as we go through this evening, Jesus didn't suffer as a victim of circumstances. He was in control. Jesus said in John 10:18, "No one takes it from me, but I lay it down myself." It's unthinkable to be forced to endure such torture. But it's truly amazing to freely choose to do such a thing. So from this, how could we ever question God's love for us? And after the crucifying, they divided his garments, casting lots. Then it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Sitting down, they kept watch over him there. And they put up over his head accusation written against him. This is Jesus, King of the Jews. So that it might be fulfilled. Once again, no surprises. God guided all things for his desired purpose. Now, the sign that was displayed reading, this is Jesus, King of the Jews. Now, the religious leaders didn't like that. They didn't believe that Jesus was obviously the King of the Jews. And in John 19, they go to Pilate and tell him, don't write that. If you want to put something, put, I am the King of the Jews. And Pilate responded with, what I have written, I have written. Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and the other on the left. And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads, saying, you who destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days, save yourself. And if you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise, the chief priests also, mocking him with the scribes and the elders, said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. If he is the King of Israel, let him come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Even the robbers who were crucified with him reviled him with these things. Now, we know from Luke 23 that one criminal rejected Jesus and the other one repented and trusted in Jesus. Even in this time, even in this event, this situation that Jesus is in, that's where he's at. That's where he's at. He's for those around him. Someone found salvation dying on a cross. So in the middle of Jesus' amazing display of love, Jesus wasn't honored. He was blasphemed. Jesus was mocked for who he was and is, a Savior, a King, and the Son of God. And then they say, if you are Jesus, if you are who you say you are, come down from the cross and we will believe. Imagine what they've already seen, what they've already heard. We've had lepers healed. We've had lame people walking, blind seeing, deaf hearing. 2 weeks prior, he raised someone from the dead, been dead for 4 days. And now they're saying, if you just come down from the cross, we'll believe. I kind of doubt it. But he didn't save himself, and the reason for it was to save others. Jesus did something greater than coming down from the cross. He rose from the dead. And when he did, they still didn't believe. They were still making up excuses for what actually happened. Now, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness over all the land. Now, this darkness happened during a full moon. And the reason we know that is because Passover was always held on a full moon. And interesting enough, it is impossible to have a solar eclipse during a full moon. So there is no other reason for this other than just creation itself, mourning for what's going on. Jesus was on the cross for around 6 hours. From 12 to 3, it was dark, it says across the land, and not talking just like the solar eclipse we see, where it's dark. So approximately between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., Jesus was on the cross. And we describe what happens to your body and who you are when you're on the cross, to be there from almost a day's work, to be hanging on a cross. Not only in the pain, the agony, the humiliation, but what people's saying, what people's doing. Very, very, very difficult. And then we'll continue on. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of those who stood there when they heard that said, this man is calling for Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a reed and offered it to him to drink. The rest said, let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come and save him. So if we go to Psalm 12, I'll read the very first part of, Psalm 22. And here's what it says. It says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? And if you continue through 22, it goes on and describes rather well what's happened to Jesus right now with the crucifixion. Isaiah 53 is the same way. And in quoting Psalm 22, Jesus declared the fulfillment of that prophecy. There might have been some in the crowd that caught that and understood that, thought about what that meant. And some of them might have realized exactly what was going on at that time. Why have you forsaken me? The agony of this cry is significant. At some point before Jesus died, and before he said it is finished, God the Father placed upon God the Son the guilt and the wrath our sin deserved. And Jesus bore it perfectly, completely, satisfying the wrath of God for us. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. John 19:30 tells us, Jesus said, it is finished. The debt was paid that we owed. No one took Jesus' life from him. He gave it up on his own. Death had no hold over him. He stood in the place of sinners, but never was or ever became a sinner himself. John 10:17 through 18, we touched on a little bit earlier. Jesus said, I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. Now, some events that happen immediately, results of Jesus' death. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom, and the earth shaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of their graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, were looking on from afar. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. So the veil of the temple separated the holy place from the most holy place. This clearly at that point separated God from man. The veil was torn from top to bottom, and God was the one doing the tearing. That opened up the point. We can go boldly before the throne now. It opened up that spot, that moment in time. It said the earth shaked, graves opened. The crucifixion of Jesus struck even the seasoned Roman centurion, confessing this was the Son of God. The only issue with that, he could change one word and say this is the Son of God, because he still is. This gentleman had supervised hundreds of crucifixions, but he knew that this one was absolutely unique. Now, who was there at the cross that day? Who was around the cross? There were men, there were women. There were Jews, the Gentiles, the rich, the poor, the high class, the no class, the religious, the non-religious, the guilty, and the innocent, the oppressor, the oppressed, the deeply religious, and the indifferent. All sorts of conditions of people were attracted to the cross, and that's still true today. An evening approached, and there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in clean linen cloth and placed it in the new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. Jews didn't want the bodies on the crosses during Passover. That's to take it down, to get it down before Sabbath. Joseph prepared Jesus' body for burial the best that he could with the time that he had. Luke 23 tells us that the time was short because the Sabbath drew near. And we read later that the women were coming early to finish the preparation for Jesus' burial. And as we finish, I think it was 60, it says, "And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed." At that moment, all hope was lost. Jesus was dead. Religious leaders were satisfied. The disciples, other followers of Jesus, they were consumed with sorrow and fear and confusion. They had ideas of what was supposed to happen. And nobody had this idea that this was going to happen. So what now? I would imagine questions came up through the night. I mean, we had disciples that when they showed up to arrest him, they ran off into the olive grove. That might have been the last time they saw Jesus alive. And you've got Peter. He told Jesus, "Not me, never will I ever." And Jesus said, "For the rooster crows 3 times, you will." And he did. And I could imagine the guilt he felt. You know, he was kind of the leader of the group, I suppose, and he's the one that, denied him in the time he needed him most. So I could imagine probably some guilt, probably some shame. What could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? And what can I do now? So as we reflect on this moment in history, how Jesus suffered for you and for me, we can ask ourselves those same questions. What could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? And what can I do now? Jesus loves you. Jesus died for you. And what we can do now is give our life to him, to serve him and to love him and to share the gospel with those around us and share this story with the ones around us so they know what Jesus did for them as well. There was a gentleman named Philo Jones, and I remember as a kid he came to Sylvania as an evangelist. And one of the things he said, and I always remembered, he said, "You can't do anything about the past, my friend, but you can start right now and make a brand new end." And with these questions, what could I do? What should I do? Doesn't matter. You can't. But what can you do now? And that's the beauty of the gospel, is you don't have to live where you've been. If you came in, once again, full of sorrow, full of fear, full of confusion, you can leave it here. And you don't have to pick it back up. You can leave it here. You can leave it at the feet of Jesus. So as we prepare to close, the altar is open. If anyone would want to pray, great place to do it. Do we have oh, perfect. Sorry, Daniel, I didn't ask you before. But yeah, just a time to reflect. It's kind of a heavy night if we think about how we end. He rolled the stone in front of the door and departed. He left. I'm thankful. Spoiler alert, he's alive. So that's great. But it's good to think about what he did, what he went through,